Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to your virtual Monitor Farm meeting for February. I hope you're all somewhere warm and got a bit of snow or ice or not, as the case may be, outside. Great to have you here for our regional update for February, and I'm joined this morning by Tom Mead, our Duxford Monitor Farmer, Richard Ling, our This Monitor Farmer, and Andrew and Sam Melton, our Wisbech Monitor Farmers. And yeah, we're looking forward to having a good conversation with you here. I'm Teresa Meadows, your Knowledge Exchange Manager for East Anglia. So we've got an interesting morning, hopefully lots of conversation about a few different topics for you this morning, and an opportunity to catch up and think about things that are going on locally and across East Anglia. Sadly this morning we can't see you or hear you, but you're very much part of this morning, and we're going to make it as interactive as we can as we go through. So if you have got any questions or things to kind of ask, discussion as we go through, I'll show you how you put that in to the questions box in a minute, but please feel free to use that. You can tweet us or WhatsApp me, or ask questions as we go through. That's very much what this morning's about. We're scheduled to be here till 10:30 this morning, so we've got plenty of time for discussion and conversation, and yeah, lots of topics that Tom and Sam and Andrew and Richard have got to talk about, so plenty of interest ahead. The session is being recorded, so if you wanted to look back or go back, you can do that, and that will be available on our YouTube channel in the next few days. Everybody here is on Twitter, so if you wanted to tag anyone in or ask them a question or direct message them afterwards, that's their Twitter handles there, and #MonitorFarm links you to other activities going on around the country as well. There are basis and okay points for being with us this morning. If you'd like to claim those, if you pop your name, your basis account number and your postcode for basis, and add on your date of birth for Noroso into the questions box, we'll record those for you, Christian and I, behind the scenes. If you're watching this back on the recording, if you drop me an email, teresa.meadows@ahdb.org.uk, I'll make sure those are accredited for you as well. So, as a bit of an introduction to our monitor farms across East Anglia, Tom has been working with David Hurst, and I'll explain where David is in a minute, over at the Duxford Monitor Farm, just on the edge of Cambridge. Tom and David, we got together, didn't we, Tom, to represent two kind of businesses of different sizes. So David, farm manager for Robert Law at Law Farming, and Tom on a family farm, and that's been really interesting to follow the differences over the last few years. Richard Ling farms up in Suffolk near Dis, and has got cattle as well as the arable operation, and has been, had your first winter, Richard, and then had coronavirus change things slightly from Worthing Village Hall, but no more so than Andrew and Sam, who not even quite managed a monitor farm meeting in reality, have done more virtual than you have on farm. But welcome to those of you that are up in the north of the region as well today. And then we've also got Brian Barker, who's our strategic farm in the east as well. So just to talk you through what we're going to, or just to let you know, if you go on another one, Christian, please. David Hurst isn't here at the moment because he's actually on paternity leave at the moment. Him and his wife Sophia had a little baby girl last Friday, and they're all doing well, so he's on paternity leave, so is with us, but yeah, from home probably today. So congratulations, David, on behalf of all of us and Sophia, your new family. And David's also got news as well, in that he has actually accepted a job working for Stratton Parker from their Northumberland office, and is going to be a farm management consultant, a senior associate director with Stratton Parker. So he's got lots of change happening in life at the moment, and will be kind of finishing his monitor farm tenure with us at the end of March, and we'll do a wrap up and share what he's learned over the course of his programme. Tom's kindly agreed to roll on and stick with us, the Monitor Farm programme for the next winter as we move the programme forward. So congratulations to David on many accounts, and we'll make sure you hear from David before he moves up to Northumberland. So the format of today, we're going to keep it quite interactive as we go through this morning. We've asked David and Richard and Andrew and Sam and Tom to kind of think about things that they are pleased with from the season, that they've done something new or something different, something that they'd like to change, and kind of to get something for feedback from you about. And we've got a series of photos to talk to as we go through this morning. About those different topics, lots of topics to cover. Like I said, we're here till 10:30, but questions will be taken in discussion throughout, so feel free to chip in. The way you do that and ask your questions is if you're on a computer, there's the panel that you can see there. If you click that orange arrow in the questions box, you can type your question and then click send, and it's myself and Christian that can see that behind, and I'll ask those questions. If you're on the app, there's a little kind of chat icon at the top, and you can click that and do that the same. So please feel free to use that as we go through. So I think the next slide, Christian, just to kind of warm us up and see where you are and what you're doing, and give us a bit of feedback. So just to kind of do a quick poll. So for you this morning, which is your closest monitor farm? Are you closer to the Duxford, the Diss, or the Wisbech Monitor Farm? And I can see we've got some good people here joined us, so we'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. If you have to click on the screen on the poll, you're well away this morning. 70% of you have voted already, so we've got most of you. So if we display the results, so we've got quite a lot of good representation there from Suffolk, Norfolk, Richmond, and Cambridgeshire, and a good amount up in the Fens and Cambridgeshire as well. So welcome to you all this morning. And then we were kind of talking about what would be the question, that if we were all at a village hall somewhere, what would we be talking about this morning? And I think probably given the weather outside, it's probably that. So just around the region weather forecast, how cold did it get with you last night or the last few nights? Has it been, you know, quite warm, a bit cold, or pretty cold across there? And we were talking about it, weren't we, Richard and Tom and Andrew and Sam, you know, what effect that the snow will have around the region. So we've got, yeah, 75% of you have voted. So if we show the audience the results. So yeah, most of you about -1 to -4, but actually 46% of you are feeling quite cold. So hopefully you're warm in the office where you are at the moment. So if we come back to, so I don't know, yeah, Richard, Tom, like you were saying, it's not been that cold over near you, have you?
Yeah, it'd be interesting if there's any opinions out there on what effect that's going to have on any pests, mainly flea beetle larvae and aphids. There's been a bit of chat about that, and we grow sugar beet, so whether we're going to need or get the authorization for neonics on that with the cold temperatures, and whether it's been cold enough to kill aphids, really.
Yeah. What's your thought, Richard? I know you've been out there. You've had
very similar, really. My thoughts are on the flea beetle larvae that are in the oilseed rape. So sort of the unknown. What temperature does it need to get to? Have they actually been protected by some of the snow covering that we've had? We've had quite a bit more snow here than certainly Tom has out Cambridgeshire way. So yeah, it's all these different dynamics, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, Jamie said it should clear some yellow rust, but won't be cold enough to kill flea beetle larvae potentially. So yeah, potentially good for the diseases, but like you say, Tom, it depends where you are as to what your fortunes are, isn't it, as well? So
yeah,
yeah, good. Right, so I think that will kick us off into our first series of our slides. So do you want to start us off, Tom, with something that you're pleased with from this season so far for our discussions this morning?
Yeah, so yeah, my pleased with photo was a picture of our supplementary bird feeding plots or winter bird food plots as part of our countryside stewardship. I think we're probably all agreed that it was quite a difficult year in the east last year. And we did have some reasonable crops, but it was our first year of stewardship. These are really established well, and yeah, it's gone well. I was a bit sceptical of countryside stewardship, you know, there's lots of talk about late payments and things like that, but you kind of speak as you find. We've been paid on time. We've done some capital works as well. We've put about 1 kilometre of hedging in, which we started in November and have been paid for that. So like I say, speak as you find, and touch wood, it continues that way. Because I think that's quite important to encourage us to to take these options up. That the payments need to be on time. You've got to be rewarded for your hard work, because it's not also that easy. Sometimes this looks well, but we've got some wildflower margins that have been quite tricky to establish last year. But yeah, no, on the whole, I'm pleased with it. We've took some poor areas out of production into these environmental stewardship measures, and we'll come on to that a bit more later with a few more of my photos, and perhaps a bit of chat about whether we need to do more of that going forwards, and with BPS going, just how we need to think about some of these marginal areas on the farm. So
yeah, it's a great picture. Have you seen a lot of birds and things in that area, Tom?
Yeah, fantastic number of birds, and I was actually out yesterday putting some more supplementary feed out. Yeah, it's really rewarding. You know, when I went into this, I think, you know, part of it was financial, but you've also got to kind of have a belief and want to do that and make the farm look good. And like I said, with some of the capital works and connecting up some hedgerows and things like that. So yeah, no, it's been good.
Have you got stewardship up with you, Andrew and Sam?
It's something we've just gone into starting in January this year. So we've got the plantings to do this season, but we've very much the same as Tom. We're looking at wild bird food mixes and some supplementary feeding with some grass margins, including some flower mixes in there, pollen and nectar. So we're looking forward to that. We used to be in the old ELS scheme, so we're sort of looking forward to see whether this can bring a little bit more of a dynamic with birds and the wildlife around.
Do you know roughly how much land you took out in the end, Tom? Did you work it out, or how did you work it out? In
I haven't actually worked it out as a percentage. I probably should do, because some of it's that's on our main block. We've got a contract farming block which we haven't put any options in. About 30 acres, about 12 hectares in total. I think we've got about 4 hectares of this winter bird food mix, and 8 hectares of grass and wildflower margins, and then we've also had a small grassland field that we've put into a GS4 option, which is you know, a herbal rich lay. So yeah, just trying a few things, and perhaps actually when our agreement's finished, there will be a new elms scheme, or you know, we might look to do more. We've also got some of the farm which was scheduled ancient monument, so we've put that into a reduced cultivation strategy to protect the archaeology underneath there as well.
And Richard, you're looking at it as well, aren't you, in terms of the farm and how you can make it work, the rotation?
Yeah, so we're also in our first year. So we got ours last year, and have got very similar pictures to that. I'd just like to ask Tom, what seed mixture did you use there?
It was from Oakbank, but it was a sort of feed and flush mix. I can send it to you or look it out exactly what it's got in it, but it's got a good range of stuff in it. And it's a 2-year mix with kale in it, which I didn't know whether the kale would establish, but actually I think because it was clean ground that hadn't had it on for a long time, and we drilled it and had some good rain straight after, the kale's actually still there. So I'm hoping to leave that in for 2 years, which, you know, is good as well, because, you know, financially then we haven't got to rip that up and completely reseed it. But I think what I'm going to do is probably reseed some of it, so as we don't actually take all of that out in one chunk then to reseed it, we keep a continual piece of cover there and do it in sections, because that's actually like, there's about 1.5 hectares there all in one block. So yeah,
Quite an interesting way of doing it, wouldn't it? John has just written in and said, going back to our kind of previous discussion, can't imagine the frost will have much effect on flea beetle, and an interesting one, the French have much colder winters and still have flea beetle problems. So yeah, it's interesting when you look over the border and doing it. Good, okay. So the next one then is Richard, I think, something that you're pleased with.
Yeah, so something that I'm pleased with, oilseed rape this year, mainly because of the year before was so patchy and such a difficult year, but this year we've not seen the level of issues, and we've got some lovely even fields of oilseed rape. that some are a little bit too advanced, but this frost and snow is sort of checking them back a little bit quite nicely now. But yeah, really pleased. I was tempted to put a picture up of some of the wheat fields that were covered in snow, because that's the best they've looked since last harvest. So.
Yeah, it's interesting with you've got a picture of rape, and you know, Andrew, Sam, are there any rape crops up there that are looking quite the same this year?
We've pretty much taken a sabbatical this year, so we haven't got any oilseed rape in the ground for the first year for many years. So we're just waiting and seeing. We've just had 2 or 3 now years which yields have gradually declined to a to a degree where it's not financially viable at the moment. Maybe this year would have been different. I have seen some good established oilseed rape out there, but we want to take stock and just see what other options. Like I know Rich has been doing some companion cropping. There's a lot of talk about it in the industry with other mixes and all sorts of things. So we thought we'd just take stock and see what happens for the future.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to hear those of you that are listening, you know, whether you've given up on rape or you're still going to give it a go, or you'll take advantage of it if you think there's enough moisture that's there. I know, Richard, you've definitely decided that, you know, moisture's key, haven't you? And that's been a success for the last little year. Yeah, Tim's just said it's all down to the weather in August, and yeah, is that what's going to make a big difference? I know, Tom, you've decided really that you're not going to be able to, you know, is it worth kind of trying, isn't it?
I'm sort of, you know, watching this year to see what happens, because there was some fantastic crops about, and it actually depends what happens now with the larvae and between now and harvest. I would be tempted to go back into it, you know, depending on pressures and things. I think we've had quite a break from it, but tried to grow some pulse crops which have been very variable as well. So we might try a small bit again next year, and see how it goes. But you know, this year can be one thing, next year can be something completely different. But I think it's a good crop to get a bit of diversity onto the farm and to actually grow with some companions, because you know, hopefully you can fairly successfully take those out. So yeah, I'm watching to see what happens this year. We might try a small bit, depending on the weather at harvest time.
Jamie's asked, Richard, are you growing hybrids or conventional, and what seed rates did you use?
Yeah, so this is a hybrid variety, and slipped out of my head exactly what the name of it is, but it's a Here hybrid rape. So the seed rate was about 2.4 kilos a hectare, so it's really not very high. This picture is actually a field that had some chicken muck on it, which is why it's you know, it's got a good bit of biomass about it, and I'll sort of come on to that later on. We've got some other fields that we've put cattle muck on, and I would probably class those as a little bit more at the correct sort of where you'd want the rape planter's size for this time of year. So I think there was quite a bit of residual N or something left over in this field from the previous wheat crop, plus what was in the chicken muck was obviously good stuff as well. So
what companions did you put in there, Richard? Because you can't actually see many in that photo.
No, so there was 2. We've done a full strip trial across all of our fields. So this picture, there was companions under there of berseem, clover and buckwheat, but because the rate got going so well on here, it's outcompeted those companions. So it's something which is a factor to bear in mind with companion cropping, is that you know, do we need to establish some of those companions almost a little bit before we're putting the oilseed rape in the ground? So there's certainly been quite a lot of chat around fenugreek needing to go in a lot earlier, which is one of the other additions that we had in the other fields and the other mixes. So companions. So, but I'll probably come on to that later on. So.
Yeah, William's asking the same question. What were the companions got in there? Andrew, Sam, I'll ask you this question from James. With rape and beet struggling to show the profit, what are the other options? And I know that's something that you're both struggling with at the moment. We shouldn't ask you that question. It's a painful question for most of us at the moment, isn't it? But do you want to talk through some of the other kind of things that you're thinking about or tried?
Yeah, I mean, rape has always been a massive part of our break crop for us. And I still would like it to be in the future, because we are struggling to find other break crops which can offer the same of entry into her first week. So yes, I'm hoping it's not going to be a long-term thing where we're out of oilseed rape, but we just don't know. You'll see a couple of slides, I think later on, we've just dipped our toe into winter linseed. I don't see it as a complete replacement, but maybe it's something we can look at. It has, we'll see how we go, but it's got advantages of being early to harvest compared to what we've always known of spring linseed in the past. So we're hoping for a harvest date of around the end of July, probably just after or just around the end of normal oilseed rape harvest, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. And obviously that gives us an early entry into wheat, and hopefully we do suffer as well from quite a lot of pigeon damage. Pest control is always a trouble through the winter. It's not larvae, flea beetle, then it's pigeons. So we have seen a small amount of pigeon damage or pigeons feeding on the linseed, but nowhere near as much as normal. So we've had a lot less work to do through the winter time. So it's, yeah, I haven't really found the answer. We haven't, but we'll just keep looking, the same as all of you guys out there. It's not easy at the moment.
And Tom, you've been looking at pulses, haven't you? You know, in the same way, just to try and find what you can.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've had them quite a few years. We've got some peas going in the ground again this year. You know, I like it from a kind of crop health point of view and growing different crops, or general soil health point of view. We've got sugar beet this year. They've yielded about 30% down from what they did the year before, so just not really sustainable. We've got another year to go on our contract with that, and we'll see what happens. You know, I hope that still carries on, and I think even if there's some pressure in the next couple of years, that will hopefully get resolved through breeding and other measures going forwards, because I think, you know, we still need options for break crops, because I think everybody's struggling to make any break crops pay. So yeah, whether it's that or we have to think a bit more radically and look at some stewardship options or new elms options as we go forwards, and perhaps more fallows and other crops that we move around. But yeah, hopefully some of these issues are kind of short term, particularly with the sugar beet, and that we can keep working with the industry and resolve some of them.
Yeah, definitely. Some interesting observations coming in from here. David said, as an agronomist, the best rape I saw in 2020 were volunteers in a drilled forage maize crop, stonking plants that weren't affected by maize herbicides. So there you go. It's funny where you find good rape, isn't it? Jamie's saying kind of in northwest Essex, the larvae have increased during the winter, but yet to see how these increased numbers will affect the crop going forward. And yeah, that's definitely this time of year, isn't it, going out checking larvae. And I think Richard will come back to that a bit later. Trevor's pointed out an interesting thing on our weather chat, saying that fungi will be suppressed, but be aware of snow mould, especially on forward crops. And I think that's something we don't normally see, isn't it? But yeah, something to think about. It will have an effect on insects or larvae, but not sufficiently enough to forget. And snow's a good insulator. So yeah, some interesting thoughts coming in. Thank you. Keep your thoughts coming in, and we'll keep asking you questions to read them out as we go. So thank you, Richard, for that. It's good discussions at the moment on break crops, and certainly something we've been discussing a lot in our business groups, particularly sadly for harvest 2020. Finding a profitable break crop is difficult, isn't it? So on to happier things. Andrew and Sam, I do want to talk us through your well, slightly less happy, and then we'll go on from here.
Well, we thought, obviously everybody's probably seen this after sugar beet. We have actually we've sort of given up sugar beet for the coming season, just through obviously aphid problems and also soil conditions. We've been growing sugar beet on our heavier soils for a number of years now, with some really good yields, to be fair. This is really obviously you see from the picture here from that. If we go on to the next photo, so we looked at, this is following on from our last webinar, first webinar, where we had problems after sugar beet. So we decided to put a summer or spring summer cover crop onto the fields instead of trying to grow a crop in the spring. And there was a few slides on the first webinar, but that's the effect of a maxi crop router cover crop. Quite a diverse range of different seeds in there, and from that we sort of took the opportunity to look at how we could manage the cover crops. It's pretty much our first time with using the cover crops. So we was looking at trying to obviously improve soil structure conditions in the soil. So we got a mass of top cover crop, and actually rooting underneath. We found some really massive rooting structures going down well below the compaction layers. And from that, we sort of looked at deciding, do we take the cover out just by chemical means, or do we look at topping? So we looked at topping basically in two different methods.
Heights, yeah.
So we looked at topping it at a sort of halfway down to try and sort of get some secondary rooting prior to a winter wheat crop, and then we took it actually further down, and it still actually grew back. We found that the lower height was better, and then from that we didn't actually have to do any further cultivations. We did look at using a cultivator we purchased last year, which we're very happy with, as a Adaptation XL with cross-cutter discs. As you can see from the pictures in the bottom right-hand corner, it did a very good job of taking that cover crop down in one pass. Again, we're not sure we actually needed to do that, because we did actually, if we go to the next slide, you can see where next slide, I think we're showing where we've sort of drilled the wheat, winter wheat, following the cover crop. That was into where it was a topped cover. Very happy with the establishment of the wheat after the cover. Obviously that was an early entry wheat, so we were drilling that in sort of, I think that was around the last week, third, fourth week of September. We had no problems drilling into that at all, and we're really happy with what the covers have done for our soil structure. On some of the field where you saw where the sugar beet harvester was stuck, on 75% of the fields, there was 3 or 4 fields, so there were only one field we actually put the subsoiler through after the cover crop. It did that much of a good job, we felt, with the soil structure. We had someone out to have a look. We did lots of digging in the field in different areas, and found it was just amazing what a cover crop can do. Obviously sometimes you need something else extra, but it was actually fascinating for us to see what cover crops can do, and it's just how we can use them in our rotation. And this one obviously is not is a first wheat entry, and it's not something we would normally do, because we would hope to have a crop prior to that, but it was our first look and see, so that was obviously something we were very, very pleased with. Yeah.
Wow, it looks good, doesn't it? Yeah. I think
did you spray it with glyphosate, obviously pre-drilling quite early by the looks of it?
We did. I was apprehensive of what to do, so we tried different methods. So we sprayed some of it off about a week or 10 days, I think, before we drilled, and then we actually did try some, and we actually included it in the pre-em mix in the tank when we put the pre-em on the wheat. Still a little bit apprehensive about any black grass, whether we're getting it all just with that in the pre-em mix. So I was a little bit apprehensive where we were, so we put some in obviously 10 days before we drilled as well on there, and then we tried some after as well. So we sort of looked at both methods, and to be fair, I couldn't really see a problem between either. So
interesting how it develops through the season, won't it? Yeah, hopefully not with black grass. Mark's asked a question here. It's a bit of a point, one that is on a lot of people's minds at the moment, but given the photo that you just said, do you think with the damage to soil where the sugar beet is worth growing, and considering potentially having a poor following spring cereal? But I know that's different for people. I don't know what your thoughts are, Andrew and Sam, from what you've just said. But
yeah, I mean, on those particular fields, that was obviously from harvest 19, and then obviously we didn't plant a spring crop. The fields are in too poor a condition on our heavier soils to try and get them round to drill a spring crop. So we took obviously the opinion to put a cover crop in there to give us a good entry into wheat. That's not normal for us, so it hasn't been in the past with
That's the first time we've fallowed.
That's the first time we've generally had to fallow any amount of area, but sugar beet, let's say, we've just had, obviously everybody had 2 or 3, especially 2 seasons for various conditions, whether it be soil conditions at harvesting, or whether it be due to obviously issues with aphids in the crop this year. So yeah.
What's your thought on that, Tom? Because you're on a completely different soil type, really.
Yeah, I mean, generally we can still get on, fairly well even through the winter. We're not trying to grow it on heavy land, and I think maybe that's an issue where people have been growing beet on perhaps land that's not suitable for growing it. But personally, I think we need to keep options, because I think we've all learned that just having too much of one crop leads you down the wrong path. So, for me, it's about having as many options as possible. And adapting that depending on the field it's going on, the season, and just being quite mobile with other seasons about what we do grow.
If we're going to add on there as well, normally we would be lifting our sugar beet on our heavier soils in sort of late September, early October. The conditions just basically, as it rained that year, it just kept raining, so it didn't allow us. We probably should have pushed earlier on, but we sort of think it'll come a bit drier in sort of end of October, early November, and that particular field where the harvest was stuff was actually harvested, I think, 19th, mid-December. That's it, and we couldn't get some of the rest of the field out until February, and that doesn't work on our land. So it was very much unusual circumstances, but we normally try and get an entry of winter wheat in the ground, like you say, normally in mid to late October following the sugar beet. So unusual circumstances.
Been a different few years, isn't it, for doing that? And I know, Richard, you're kind of thinking, yeah, sugar beet, you've gone away from it for that reason, haven't you? So, right, I'm going to ask you this question from Dan. Sorry, Richard, I'm going to just do this one. So Dan wants to know, will you graze using any sheep graziers to allow more nitrogen to be available for your cover crops? Is that something you're looking at, Andrew and Sam?
I know there's been a lot of talk about it, and I've seen it work quite successfully. I've seen on some people's farms through, obviously I've seen on webinars. I'm not sure that it's something we can do on our farm. I could be completely wrong, and probably other people will tell us different, but I'm not sure if that's how that will work for us. We'll come on to later in some other slides where we're using some catch crop cover crops prior to drilling the winter wheat, so that there isn't as much time in there. So I think that's where we will potentially be using cover crops, hopefully in the future, rather than in this situation. Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll be looking for a short-term 6 to 8 week catch crop prior to a crop of winter wheat. So that's what we'll be looking at a little bit later on.
Yeah, it's working out what works in the rotation, isn't it? Jamie's put an interesting point here that I think maybe we'll chime with you. He said from experience with beet, they'll only rotate smaller areas of beet on the lighter land and aim to lift them before mid-November. He said it just doesn't seem to be financially viable over 2 years without getting a first wheat in behind. Yeah. They can't guarantee even getting a chance on the heavier land. So yeah, that's kind of echoes what you said, experience from Jamie there. They're all coming in now. Philip said, I'll just ask this one and then we'll move on. How did you establish the cover crop after the sugar beet? Did you direct drill, or I guess you have to cultivate to get a level seed bed?
Yes, I mean that because the soil was in sort of fairly bad condition, so we waited until the springtime before it dried out enough to do any cultivation. So in that particular instance, we had wheelings in there 12 inches, 30 centimeters deep in places, probably a bit more. So all we could do on there was to level the surface out. We actually used the top down to level the surface. We did that once. It was obviously still waiting for the land to dry out a bit more, and then we went over it again. And then we went in. We bought the Vadastat cross cutter. So we just happened to use that area of land to go over it prior to drilling. Like I say, it probably is a bit overkill or something we didn't need to do, and we drilled it with the John Deere 750A. We're looking in future to add a seeder onto the back of the cross cutter, so to try and save a pass. Because I feel with cover crops we don't need to have that as an extra pass. Anyway, we need to try and keep the cost down as much as possible. We've obviously got the seed cost, so we need to try and keep the cost down otherwise. So that's something we're looking at for the next season.
That's something you've done as well, haven't you, Richard, with your front mounted?
Yes. Yeah, we looked at putting a seeder on our low disturbance subsoiler, but actually when we costed it all up and the amount, we decided we'd go down the route of building our own front tank out of an old combination drill that was sat in the back of the shed, and yeah, it ended up we saved ourselves best part of sort of £2.5 grand by doing that, but also then had a much more diverse tank that we could do a lot bigger seeds, and we're now not restricted on what seed that goes through that front tank. So it's just a matter of putting a mushroom and some seed pipes on pretty much any piece of machinery that goes on the back of the tractor. Yeah, so
it's good on farm innovation.
Yeah.
John said here, just going back to the sheep comment, he's used sheep this year and think they've been brilliant. He's actually has seen very little poaching, even though it's been so wet, and it was a wet field, and the frost is sorting out the surface crown there as well. So, you know, people are having good experiences from using sheep. So, good, right. So if we finish that, thank you. It's good discussions on that, Andrew and Sam, and yeah, great to see the field there. So if we move on to the next one, Christian, I think if we, yeah, so this next section is something that the guys have done new or different this season, and they've got some interesting things coming up here. So Richard, you're up first. I think, do you want to just talk us through what you've done with your nitrogen?
Yeah, so I'll just sort of start with this really as a backstory. So going back to last spring, and we wanted to do a tramline nitrogen trial system, and we used a couple of different products. And in this field in particular, we used a product called Nurture N and straight fertilizer. So the left-hand side was full rate, and the right-hand side was 30% less N. Now, the reason I've highlighted this picture is because it was taken quite early in the spring, and actually we saw the difference in the first application. So this was just after the first application of N, and we think it's that period of time right there that gave us the issue of the reduction in yield, because basically the plant reduced tillers. Because if we go to the next slide, Christian, then you start looking at the rookery A and B. B has actually got more N in the grain. Well, that had the reduced yield, and I think that comes down to the late rains that we had. So that the actual overall amount of nitrogen, even though there was 30% less on there, in my eyes, it was a timing issue as opposed to a quantity issue that got into the plant. And also, obviously, less yield. There was less tillers, less ears there to fulfill. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is we still haven't, you know, we didn't get to the bottom of that, mainly because we didn't foresee the dry spring that was about to hit us as badly as it did. So if we go to the next slide. So this brings us on to sort of our grand plan for this year. So we've got a product from Origin Fertilizers, which is Nutrisphere, which they're going to help us with. And basically, we're going to use our farm standard, which is 210 kilos of N per hectare. And then we're going to reduce that as straight fertilizer all the way around the outside, which is a 30 N 10 SO3 product. And then we'll reduce that by 15% and then reduce it by 30%. Each one of these rows is 36 meters wide, so it's a full tramline run. And then we'll do the same with the Nutrisphere product, and we'll reduce that by 15% and 30%. I've then put on there a 1, 2, 3, and that is to try and get to the bottom of this timing issue in case we have another dry spring, which, given how much rain we've had, we'll probably more than likely have. So then we can front load, so we can put more on earlier in the spring, and vice versa on some of the other strips, and hopefully we can see, you know, try and rule out a few things. We might end up getting to harvest and all of them end up being exactly the same, and then we just go, great, but we'll find out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a complicated thing you're trying to do, but it's yeah, it will give you some really interesting results. What's your reasoning for doing this, Richard? Just kind of remind us.
Yeah, so we're just trying to find our true baseline for our farm. I mean, we've been sort of trying to work and improve our soils, and it's always a talking point as to where, you know, where our N level should be. I've always felt that it should be slightly lower, and certainly discussions in the past with advisors, they always want to bring it back up, you know, and there's talk of higher rates than 210, but you know, some of our fields are quite varied in soil type, and rainfall in the spring hurts us quite badly some years, as it did last year. So I'm quite conscious that going forward, one, we need to be careful how much money we're spending on these crops, you know, for economical return, but two, you know, as Tom will come on to in a little while with his carbon, you know, it is going to become a big issue with carbon. So it's one of our biggest areas that we need to look at.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear if anybody out there has tried similar kind of products or looked at the nitrogen kind of thing and what experiences you've had. I know, Andrew and Sam, you're trying a few different products for different reasons as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we've got a product which is a polysulfate product, which is mainly sulfur and potash. We've got fairly good indices for potash, and the soils are generally self-sustaining, so we don't have to add any extra potash. There's been some talk over the last few years with yen and other sources of fresh potash available in the spring, when there's obviously the highest uptake through the plants. So we've always actually for the last few years used sulfur in our nitrogen. So we're just having a look to see what can come from it on, so we can do some tramline trials in a field this year, sort of try and replicate them as best we can. Coming on to actually in a couple of weeks' time, I think we've got a data webinar in there. We can sort of show what we're trying to show, where we're going to do some trials through the next few seasons, and how we can pull data and information from that to try and prove what we're doing is correct on our farm. But that's something we're looking at in the next few weeks.
Yeah, there's a lot of products out there, aren't there? And it's kind of nutrition. There's a lot of focus on nutrition at the moment, isn't it? And getting it right. Jamie's just kind of asking about what about phosphate? You know, is you know, in many ways a bit more important than K. Is that something that you're quite happy with, your phosphate, or
Myself or us? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, phosphate is one of the indices where we have to replace on a sort of regular basis. So we've been doing variable rate phosphate applications for a number of years. In recent years, we've actually looked at more placing phosphate down with the seed. Obviously, with the new John Deere 750A, you probably saw where it's got an applicator, like a starter fertilizer applicator, to try and add sort of phosphates and nutrients in with the seed or close to the seed. So that's something we're looking at, and also we're looking at just potentially adding, well, we have been for the last couple of years, adding fresh pea on it, probably lower dose than normal, just in the spring applications, just to sort of, so there's some fresh phosphate, which is hopefully not locked up straight away to help the crop get going, rather than putting big dollops on in the autumn or any periods during the year. So it's something else we're looking to do. Yeah.
Thinking it all together. Dan said here, it seems that front loading N is becoming more important due to the dry Aprils that we've had recently, and that's definitely a discussion we've had, you know, a few times, that availability of nitrogen as you go through the season. Richard, I know you're going to be kind of sampling this using the kind of grain samples and things, and through the season. I know, Tom, you've started to kind of do that and build up a bit of a picture with your soils and tissue testing as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I think that's probably, you know, it's something we haven't done enough in the past, but we're starting to do that more now through tissue testing and grain sampling, and then kind of running our own spreadsheet to just build up a picture of the farm and be a bit more confident about the nitrogen levels we're using, and, you know, nutrients and trace elements and things, not just chucking them on because we think it's a good thing, but actually having some data to back that up. And I think that's quite important for everybody going forwards, and this kind of nitrogen use efficiency links into that as well. We've certainly front loaded N applications the last few years because of, well, on our dry soils, but if you don't have that crop canopy there and get enough N on early, you do lose tillers. And you pay for that later in the season, but it does make the decision of kind of total N a bit more difficult, because then if you get a really dry spring, you've potentially over applied, and, you know, particularly in a year like last year when you've got droughty patches and things. So it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, we'll be watching with interest, Richard, and see how you get on. It's the story and thinking about it as much as anything, isn't it, as well? So brilliant. So on to Andrew and Sam for your something new and something different. And the next slide, Christian.
So this really follows on from our other cover crop. So this is a catch crop grown in a second wheat situation. So we've set up a field just to try and do a bit of a trial this year. Obviously, we was hoping to have open meetings on farm, but you can see on the left-hand side of the slide is a section we ploughed. The rest of the field was shallow tillage using the Adaptation cross cutter. In there as well, we've got some straw strips, so tram lines with straw left on to see what effects any residual straw has on establishment. And also with the catch crop in there again, which is something new to us, to see whether that's something we can use. And this catch crop there was drilled sort of mid to late August after the wheat, as soon as we could get on. It was drilled with a 750A again, because that's the only sort of machine we had available which could do the job. Obviously, we was looking to add that to the cross cutter in the future to save it on a pass. So yeah, we've set this up just to see what differences. We've had some soil tests done. We've done some digging to see how things go through the season. And on the right hand side, you can see there's some good rooting in a short period of time, which was sort of 6 to 8 weeks growth. I was well pleased with it. As it happened, when we took this through to establishment, I don't know if that goes on to the next slide, does it? I can't remember now. When we were looking at this, that's a picture of obviously the cross cutter in action there. And then there's probably always, oh, there we go. We got a moving picture. Yes, I mean, we used to have a carrier years ago, but this is a cross cutter, so you're only looking to use this very shallow. So tillage, you're only 2 to 5 centimeters deep. So no depth to the action at all. Just to create a little bit of tilth there, just to mix the straw a little bit. You don't obviously get vast amounts of movement with the straw. So yeah, that's what we were looking at there. So when it comes to the next, there must be a next slide there, maybe with the drilling of the wheat on there. So yeah, so this was the 750A drilling in action, straight into the cover crop. This was previously sprayed off with glyphosate, I think about 5 days prior. Conditions were not ideal at all. The weather again this year changed for us, like obviously many of you, and we wasn't sure whether we should even be in the field, but we said, well, we've got to try this system, see how it works. Obviously, I would like to have been drier earlier, a little bit earlier in the season, if we knew it was going to rain. Obviously, yes, hindsight is a wonderful thing. But in all honesty, it actually travelled very well across the field. With the cover there, it held everything fairly clean. Tyres, we're running low ground pressure tyres. Those are Bridgestone tyres. They're running about 8 psi on the back, I think, and probably 8 or 9 on the front. I think something like that. So we were trying to keep the compaction down to a minimum. You can see on the left-hand side there of the picture there, you can see where the wheelings have been, and I don't think I've actually put any photos on here as yet, but where the crop establishment, I think there's one picture, next one on with the establishment, where the wheelings were. Maybe it's not quite as good, but you know, it's a look-see. It's something we need to look at to try and keep our costs down going forward. Is this something we can use on our soil types? In the past, I would have said no. Again, this year, after a very tricky autumn, it's still not ideal, but I think there's some benefits to be had.
Considering how wet it was and raining as we were drilling, it's not too bad at all, to be fair.
No, so it's something we need to carry on and look at, and we'll take this through to yield with the different sections, and we can use some of the data management tools we've got to try and pull out the differences between the different operations. And we'll be looking at obviously machinery costings, fuel usage between the operations, as well as obviously factoring in the cover crop cost for establishment and the seed.
How does the crop look now, Sam? Is there any difference between the ploughed area and the cover crop? Well,
yeah, the ploughed area actually looks a bit better, doesn't it, really?
Because
Whether that's due to drainage or
it's
not sure, but it definitely does look better on the ploughed stuff at the moment. But
yeah, I think there was an effect. I think this was oilseed rate prior to the first week, so 2 years prior to this drilling, and I think the slug numbers in the background probably were quite high. It did have a dose of slug pellets at pre-emergence actually, and prior to drilling. Probably where the plough-based system was, it did seem to get there's better plant numbers. We haven't done the counts yet between, but you can visibly at the moment the plough-based system looks visibly better. Obviously, we shall see as we go through.
Yeah, I mean, and you're doing lots of monitoring, aren't you? I mean, we'll do the plant counts, and you've got your yield meter on your combine, and you know, we can have a look at all these things as we go through the season. So yeah, it's interesting as ever to have them all in the same field in the same kind of moment, hasn't it, and compare them and look at the costs. And we've got some good questions for you here. So William Hall said, Andrew, what's the dome on the drill used for?
The dome on the drill is basically it's implement guidance. So we used an existing John Deere Starfire receiver, which we've sort of had as a spare, and put it on the drill because we found with generally direct drilling or low disturbance drilling, we were finding that we was getting some sort of side movement with the drill pulling, not always square, but behind the tractor. So if we was using the guidance just from the tractor, it wouldn't give us 100% accuracy. So whatever we did to try and put offsets in the screen, we were finding one way to the other, we were getting gaps between the drillings. So we put the guidance on the drill, which it then uses the same RTK accuracy as the tractor. So it actually puts the drill in the correct place rather than worrying about where the tractor is. So that's what we did with that one. So that's the first as well.
Has it worked? Do you think?
made a big difference.
It's made a big difference. Let's say on our other drills, we've got a Vadastat 6 meter drill rapide. We put a small offset in there and that's absolutely fine. But we did find on this type of machine, especially in harder, tougher conditions, where it would definitely pull the drill slightly to one side in each pass.
Interesting. William's asked a different question here. Do you think a crimper in front of the drill would add anything to killing the cover crop? Is that something you've looked at? I know it's.
Yeah, we was actually going to look at that this year, but it just time didn't happen, and
being the first year of doing it, we just, yeah.
But I've seen people. I think there's some Twitter feeds out there with people using rollers or crimpers to kill off hopefully cover crops prior to spring drilling. So it'll be interesting to see how that can work. We've actually, I think some of our next slides will show where we're doing some cover cropping for spring crops. And in those, we've actually used glyphosate to kill them off. But whether it's something we can use differently in the future, I don't know.
You would think your Vadastat crosscutter would be a good tool to give that a go on the frost, because that should do quite a good job, shouldn't it?
Probably should, but I'm always very apprehensive about travelling on, and I know with the frost, but travelling across our land at this time of the year.
But the machines are still quite heavy, aren't they?
Yeah, but yeah, maybe it could be. We've just gone on. Yeah, the next slide here. That's all part.
Can I chip in before you do that? Because David's chipped in here and said the reason John Deere doesn't match is that it's in fact 5.95 meters. So.
I should have. I did know that as well, to be fair. But so there's a very small gap between each side anyway, which is nearly invisible. Now we've got the implement guidance on, but prior to that, we were still getting a shift from one side to the other. I did work those figures out, and yeah, when they sell you a drill at 6 meters, it's actually not, but it's such a small amount that actually, when it's set correctly, we found it doesn't matter. But we did realise that one.
Can I ask you, it's the power of doing it via this, isn't it? And good on you, David. Just quickly, question from Angie has said, did you find the 750A has got a bigger window in wet weather with a good cover crop as opposed to one died off and a nearly bare surface? That's quite an interesting question there.
Yeah, we've definitely found from our first experience this year with a live cover crop or with a good cover on the top, it does work so much better. If we're going to carry on doing this type of cover crops or operations, I definitely think we can leave as much as we dare on the surface to help, and it just does flow and travel, and everything seems so much better. So yeah, obviously if you go come from a vadostat drilling into bare ground in the past, something we've always been used to going to something, well, can we actually drill this with this type of cover on the top? We know it should do, you know, these direct drills do that type of operation, but actually doing it yourself is something different. You have to have that confidence. So we've definitely learned that.
Yeah, we have an instance where we sprayed a couple of fields off, didn't we? And then got caught out with the rain that wasn't meant to come, so they didn't get touched for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And going into that with the 750A compared to with fresh green cover on, you just couldn't travel.
No. So it's definitely something going forward. We can leave it till the last minute, or possibly even, like we said, with a pre-em application after drilling. Maybe it's something we can look to do, so we keep the green cover there all of the time.
Cool. So do you want to talk us through your machinery adaptation as well?
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah, well, this is a Tilso Saver Light shallow leg subsoiler. It used to be a lightland cultivator, but it didn't really work for us. It has 0.5 metre spacings between each of the tines, and some leading straight discs in front just for low disturbance, so we don't peel up too much, and it does help go through cover crop on any like remedial small amount of like shallow subsoiling. We're not in very deep, probably 6 or 7 inches when needed. It also has a rubber packer on the back to help with some consolidation, but it doesn't produce the squeezing effect that like a steel one would. So it's something new this year, just to.
I think it complements our system, what we're looking to do if we can make it work. It's for that times where you want to take some surface compaction out, you know, only at shallow depth compaction, possibly after the combine, trailers, well, obviously tractors as well. So we've just modified an old machine we had, and we're very, very pleased with what it's done so far.
Because other than that, we'd have to use a deep leg subsoiler, which wouldn't really be necessary in most of these situations that we're using it for.
Yeah.
I think it's something you've looked at, Richard, as well, isn't it? Just kind of taking specific wheelings out rather than, you know, operations across the whole field. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd had a conversation with the same guy that Andrew and Sam had, and it sort of blew my mind a little bit. We sort of come from a more low disturbance sort of subsoil system, and having to do whole fields. You know, if we deemed the field to have had a fair bit of damage, then we sort of committed to doing the whole field. Whereas after the conversation we'd had with him, it's a case of, well, establish your catch crop, or catch crop in our situation, because we're only using it for 8 weeks, but establish that and see how that grows, and use that to tell you where the real problems are, and then you can only go and then you only have to go and target maybe a headland here or a bad patch there, as opposed to whole fields, and suddenly it all starts making sense, and you can really start to tackle some serious cost savings in doing that. Not doing things for the sake of it again.
Yeah, and it's a big mindset to kind of change, isn't it? Kind of there. Just a couple of questions. William saying, was it Philip Wright? Yes, it was Philip Wright, William. Good guess. You win that one. Dan's just said a kind of interesting question here. Would the vadostat be able to drill straight into the catch crops with less biomass, do you think?
I think actually, yeah, we shouldn't rule out using the vadostat either. I know there's quite a few people out there drilling straight into covers with a vadostat. There are some options you can do with that. We did look at that. If we hadn't gone down the John Deere route, you can actually turn a twin row coulter into a triple row coulter to give it more throughput through the disc without blocking. So yeah, there's lots of machines out there you could use. I mean, you know, I'm not saying we definitely had to have a John Deere 750A by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something we felt we would like to, the route we'd go down. But no, there's lots of machines out there, and a vadostat can be one of them as well. Yeah.
It's learning and trying these different things, isn't it? Seeing what suits your soil type and your system. So, Martin sent a message in saying, you know, and it's very true, and I think you mentioned it earlier, Andrew and Sam, but kind of trying not to lose sight of some of the basics of blackgrass control. And that's something you were kind of nervous about, wasn't it? He said he's always wary of leaving a cover alive and then seeing shading with the pre-em plus the glyphosate, and wary of that antagonism between glyphosate in the mix with other herbicides. And, you know, there's all these things that we're conscious of and we've got to learn, haven't we? And depending on the season that it brings.
Some of these covers we were producing were rather large, and so obviously there was canopy there with smaller black grass underneath. So it is a worry. It's something we have to take in consideration. But like I say, that's where we had gone through and glyphosate probably sort of 7 to 10 days in front of the drill, and then where we've got a few blackgrass fields, or fields which have got more blackgrass on what I'd like, and I was worried about the shading, so I had to come back with a pre-em small dose of glyphosate to take out any visible blackgrass which was still still obviously on show. But we need to keep our chemical use down as much as we can, but we're learning really, so we'll just have to see where it takes us and how we can manage the different concepts. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, I think Tom, you've got your what you've done new and differently this season.
Oh yeah, yeah, some dodgy pictures on there. So first one is a picture of me holding some soil in November when we could actually travel and do things in person. I did a beta or a basis beta conservation course. I did my basis crop protection course 10, 12 years ago, and thought that actually, you know, changes in the industry and how we're all working, it was a good time to go and do it. So that was up at Loddington at the Game Conservancy's farm up there. And just having a detailed look at kind of IPM and IFM stuff, carbon nitrogen ratios of cover crops, and then the whole kind of thing around stewardships and how we can connect habitats and enhance them. And I was quite keen to look at it on the premise of what can I do on my farm to encourage more natural predators. You know, what types of flowers should we have in flowering margins, not just, you know, putting them in for the sake of it. So just to get a bit more thought behind that, and yeah, it was really good. And I'd encourage anybody to do it. I think it was a good time to do that. You know, the answer's not always in a can, or hardly ever in a can these days. So it's just going some of it back to basics, and some of it, you know, learning in a bit more detail about what we're doing. The next thing on there is the pictures of the pumpkins. We had a small pumpkin patch this year. It was really just a bit of a trial to see what they were like to grow and have a go at that. It really good. Despite COVID, it actually worked quite well. We had a booking system, so we knew who was coming. Just amazing how people just love coming on farm and seeing some of that and actually where stuff's grown. So that's something that we're going to probably do again next year and might evolve and develop a bit more. So just thinking what we can do on a small farm to diversify. You know, BPS is going. We've got to be thinking of other things. So yeah, that was really good fun and really rewarding. And then the last thing on there is the farm carbon calculator. I'm part of the AHDB's project where they're carbon footprinting. I think, is it 30 farms, Teresa? Yeah, 30 farms. So just looking at you know, what we do and ADAS are collating that data, because I think that's quite important, because if anybody's tried any of these calculators, it's quite subjective how you put your data in there. And I think perhaps as we all get a bit more used to using them, it'll be a bit like benchmarking. We'll have to really hone down, you know, what we're putting in what boxes and where. But yeah, so we're waiting for the results of that back, and I'm sure when they come, the HDB will be sharing them. And obviously that conversation's not going away in the next few years. But what that highlighted really was that on an arable farm, the key thing that we have to change or do something about is our nitrogen use, which, you know, following on from what Richard's doing with looking at different products, I'm quite keen to do some trials this year. You know, with any products that can add in with liquid nitrogen to improve nitrogen use efficiency. I'm under no illusion that that's going to be the total answer. I think we have to be careful about just looking to a can for it. I think if we could, you know, use some of them products, if they work, to perhaps reduce our nitrogen applications by 10 or 20, you know, 20 or 30%, and then it might come as a whole rotation. I think that comes back to you know, having pulses in the rotation, perhaps having fallow and other things like that going forwards with elms. And I know a lot of the fertilizer manufacturers as well are looking at, you know, how they can reduce the carbon in the manufacturing process. So if anybody's got any thoughts on that, or products that they've tried or things that really work, we're quite keen to do a few tramline trials on that. And I think all of us, if we're sort of grain testing or nitrogen testing our grain and things like that, it's just quite a good baseline to actually build up that data and then go forward and see what we can reduce. And maybe that's you know, variably rate applying in fields as well to get the best out of that. So that's in a nutshell what that slide's about.
Yeah, it's a fair bit happening then, Tom, in different ways, but yeah, it's good to be doing that kind of professional development and looking at it, and yeah, diversification, like you say, with BPS. If anybody hasn't used it, the BPS kind of calculator that we've got that shows the kind of drop of what you're going to be experiencing, sadly, with BPS is on our website if you want to have a look. And I think it's quite a sobering thing to plug your figures in and do. It takes about 2 seconds to do it, but I think to thinking about what you're going to do going forwards with it leaves a bit more than a 2-second worth of head scratching, so that's worth doing if you haven't tried it. Yeah, carbon, it'd be interesting to hear what people's kind of thoughts on carbon are. It's an area that we're going to look at a lot more. We've got a low carbon week coming up the first week of March, and yeah, like Tom says, the kind of 30 farms across our network that are trying it, and then going to bring it together a bit more like the labour machinery reviews. Martin's just saying here, Tom, that regarding poor nitrogen uptake this spring, it seemed that liquid nitrogen worked a bit better, some granulars better than others, but I saw that wheat irrigated to get the nitrogen working. Poly N plus looked quite good in the NIAB work. I don't know if you've got any comments on that.
Yeah, I don't know that specific product. I mean, what we have found, we went liquid nitrogen to try and improve our nitrogen use efficiency and to get it into the crop in dry seasons. But we have suffered as well from quite a lot of scorch on crops the last 2 years, and actually been quite jealous of people that are using bagged N where they've got lovely green crops, and ours have kind of got stripy yellow leaves and things, when we're also spending, you know, too much money on fungicides to protect them. So yeah, I think it's all part of it, and I'm trying to not be dismissive of some of the products, because, you know, we're sold a lot of other, or tried to be sold a lot of other products. So it's just for me defining actually what is good and what's adding value. It's no good just chucking it in the tank if it's not doing any good. I want to see some effects from it.
Yeah, no, it's good. Good. I think we're going to whiz on. So Andrew and Sam, for your oh no, I don't know who's up next. We're going to go. Is there something that you'd like to change? It might actually be Tom. We'll see. Christian, if you go on another one. No, it is Andrew and Sam. Yeah, you're.
So here we've got you can see three slides there. This is our spring cropping cover crop, so it's destined for spring barley. On the left-hand picture, it's destined for spring barley. It was following a spring barley from last year. Some land we took on as an FBT. As a residual background blackgrass effect, so we're using sort of cultural control for a 2 or 3 year break from a winter crop. Actually, it's working very well so far. This is the 2nd year. So you can see there, this was a maxi cover rooter crop again. It's the same as the first slides we showed. This was drilled in around, I think, mid-August, pretty much as soon as the 24th, yeah, 24th of August. And you can see there, it's actually got a good sort of mass of biomass there. Split down the centre. On the left-hand side, we actually, there's quite a lot of volunteer barley in there as well. So we actually applied a graminicide to the left-hand side, and actually happened to be the outside of the field. And you can see actually where, I think because there was so many volunteers there, that it obviously competed with the cover crop earlier on. So I think there was some benefit there. It's another cost, so whether it's something we should be looking at. Obviously last year was probably a drier, earlier part of harvest, so the volunteers didn't grow earlier on prior to the planting of the cover crop. The middle one we've got there was, this is actually coming spring, I think this is spring beans, pulses. And that was really something to change, really. There's a lot of volunteers there.
2.5 weeks later.
Yeah, that's 2.5, and also it's 2.5 week difference between drilling. So we decided to try see how far we could push drilling into the autumn. So it was drilled on the 9th of September. We hummed and hawed, and we thought, yeah, we're going to have a go just to see, so we know for the future. Maybe you could say it's too late. I think Richard was saying about the slide that possibly, you know, it's better to have a cover, something on the ground than not, and I probably do agree actually with our sort of shallow tillage. The left hand side was actually drilled direct into the stubble. The centre and the right hand picture has been shallow tillage for spring beans. So yeah, something potentially we need to change, something again we're just trying out. Obviously there's a lot of work here we're doing on cover crops on our land, but something I see is very important going forward. So I'd be interested in other people's comments of what they've found, what's worth doing, and you know, I suppose we've just got to keep an eye on the weather and decide maybe it's a little bit too late to be planting a cover for the spring in September. But yeah.
Yeah, feel free to type into that questions box if you've got any feedback for Andrew and Sam there. Pip said for you, Tom, that he's found a similar thing with liquid versus solid. They've actually settled for a mixture of both after having similar issues to you, Tom, in the dry springs. And yeah, it's balancing the efficiency and the machinery costings and all of these kind of things that you've got, isn't it? But yeah, challenges out there. David said for you, Andrew and Sam, he wonders whether your use of a graminicide in the cover crop could lead to a build-up of resistant black grass. It's quite an interesting one.
Yeah, again, I don't know the answer to that one. It's something we just try just to see what we felt. I mean, we don't get whether it will lead to more resistance on the fops and dims. I'm trying to think which one. I think it was a fusilade. So I think it's a fop. I remember. I could be wrong. You need to check on that one. Whether that will lead to a background resistance on those. We tend not to use hardly any contact materials on black grass now in our winter crops. Mainly it's all stacked loads of pre-em soil acting herbicides. We haven't used Atlantis or any of those type of products for the last 2 or 3 years now. So we do have resistance to those, like quite a lot of other people probably. But we're finding sort of later drillings and obviously the spring drillings here that we're not getting the black grass issues that we had, and also I would like to think we're improving them and reducing numbers quite dramatically going forward. Yeah.
Good, right, thank you. We'll just move on to the next one, I think. Tom?
Oh yeah, I was through this. Something I'd like to change. So the 2 things here, I thought we should mention the weather. So that's a field of ours that's been underwater about 4 times this winter. Sort of links back to my first slide really, that you know, going forwards, and if that field hasn't got BPS on it, should it be in something else? It doesn't always happen like that, but it just seems to be particularly bad this year. I think that's the worst I've ever seen it. You know, should that be in a grass mix or perhaps more countryside stewardship areas rather than cropping it? Although the water has gone down now, it's looking a little bit better. And the other one is just our drill box. It highlights 2 things, that picture really. We managed to get variable rate drilling work, seeding working on our drill, which I'm quite pleased with. I'm still sort of weighing up the benefits of that, but certainly we've got some quite even crops across the varying soil type. And the other point is that it was in the dark, that picture, and more of our drilling was done in the dark than in the daylight, I think, this year, just because of the way things went. So yeah, it's just kind of that highlighting that challenging season that we've had really. There's not too much more to say on that one.
No, it's I've got to mention the weather at some point, but it's been really challenging, hasn't it, both years? So yeah, hopefully we'll have a better spring ahead of us and things will improve going forward. So thank you, Tom. And then Richard, I wonder if you just want to talk through your next one, and then we'll whiz on to the audience ones.
Yeah, so something to change really. Just quickly, companion crops. I'm looking at pushing them on, which we haven't really spoken about, have we? So just want to touch on really. So companion crops, and we had some high larvae, or we did some larvae counts just before Christmas, and the chicken muck one, we didn't really see that much difference between all the 3 different mixes or different areas. You know, we were sort of 48, 52 and a 55 larvae in each plant on the chicken muck field. So the 3 different things there. So can't really say one way or the other. But on the cattle muck fields, so these fields are a lot less biomass. They were only about ankle high, which is that picture on the bottom right, where there's a companion, and that's the berseem with a buckwheat. And on average on those 2 fields, we had larvae counts of 22, 23 and a 16. Now the lowest one there, interestingly, was the one that had the fenugreek in. And when I actually had a little look back, just to sort of like, we did some scores earlier on with flea beetle damage at cotyledon stage. On the straight oilseed rape, the average was 1.86% damage. The berseem clover with buckwheat was 1.5% damage, and then the berseem, buckwheat and fenugreek one was 1.2% damage. And so, yeah, you know, is there something going on there? I'm going to certainly take that forward with companions, because I feel that the rape was a lot more protected by having the berseem in there, as well as, you know, there's something else going on with the fenugreek. So have we got it quite right? Doubt it, not at the moment, but there might still be something going on. So and if it hides the rape away and it pops out later in the year, well, happy days from my point of view. So, and then my other slide just there, or other picture, is just the companion catch crops that we're doing, and timing for me is the biggest thing that I've learned over the last couple of seasons, really. We've been holding back and trying to do it at the same time as cultivations, and, you know, if the combine's running, then we're not doing cultivations or anything like that, and trying to shoehorn all this work into a short period of time. So one was affecting the other. So going forward, I'm sort of looking to try and get those catch crop seeds either established, maybe into standing crops. So I'd like to hear, you know, how have anybody else put stuff into standing crops if they're not taking straw off the fields. I think if you're taking straw off the fields, you might run into issues with that. You know, having a green canopy underneath might cause you some other issues. So yeah, I'd like to hear other people's thoughts and timing of getting companions in and away, because you get them away, you get those roots growing. We need nice big roots. It's the root systems that are key, not what's above ground. It's all about what goes on under.
Yeah, so if anybody's got any thoughts of tried fenugreek, I mean, it's really interesting, Richard, hearing, you know, how it's quite similar and then the difference that fenugreek's made. So you've been doing that work in association with ADAS, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. They've been filtering back in because they've got a bigger project going on where they're collating all the data, and that'll, yeah, be back in. So they help set up the protocols. So and it's a real shame that we can't get everybody out onto farm, because you know, we had the 3 distinct areas, and it would have been really nice just to have gone for a walk across the fields and just said, look, see for yourselves what's going on here. So
we'll see what we can do. You're going to be visiting Andrew and Sam and looking at your plough versus your cover crop, and you kind of doing it. We'll get there. It's just different this year, isn't it? Martin said they grow fenugreek as a cut herb, interestingly, and he says it's up in 4 days, so it's obviously got that get ready to go. That's quite interesting. So whether it's that it came through quicker, or something that's interesting, Martin. Good. Right, so we just go on to the last couple then, and please feel free, if you've got any other points, just chip them in into that questions box, and we'll share them as we go through. So questions for you as an audience, although you've been brilliant to chip in. Thank you all the way through. It's great to have your input. So something that you'd like some advice on. So I think, Tom, you're up first with this. Christian, next one.
Yeah, so mine's about labour, and if people have had any experience of kind of apprentices. So I basically worked with my father, and that's my father and my daughter there. It's between Christmas and New Year, just clearing up some fallen trees. But we've got people at both ends of the spectrum there. Father perhaps wants to do less, you know, and my daughter that's not old enough to do a lot. And if people have, I'd quite like to maybe look at bringing someone young on into the industry, you know, an apprentice style person, and also possibly, you know, if that, it would work really well if I could couple that with someone that was perhaps interested in livestock, whether we could introduce some of that onto the farm and a different skill set that could perhaps complement the arable. You know, it's not always about spending hours and hours on a tractor seat, because actually as we do less cultivations and try and reduce that, you know, we can reduce that on farm. But yeah, just to see whether actually that's something I should be looking at, or whether people think that'll give me more headaches than just trying to do it myself. And we did we had a Monitor Farm meeting a couple of years ago, which hopefully a few of you come to, with Alan Brighton, just talking about kind of the time that we spend as individuals and time management, and making sure that we're using our time to the best ability. And you know, he talked about doing £10 an hour, £100 an hour, and £500 an hour jobs, and I'd rather be doing the £100 an hour, the £100 an hour jobs, rather than the £10 an hour jobs. And also just sometimes working, having a small team or a couple of you to do jobs makes things a lot more fun and enjoyable on farms, and particularly going forwards with more diversified projects. So any thoughts on that? Welcome.
Don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Richard or Sam and Andrew.
Yeah, it really comes down to the types of people that are out there, really, because personalities are everything in this situation. You know, you need finding that right person, and there's no reason why an apprentice won't hit it off. Conversely, you can get the other side of the spectrum where you end up just babysitting, and they take more of your time than help. So but yeah, best of luck. I'm sure you'll find the right person.
Thanks.
Dan said here, would a placement student fit the bill? Maybe, I don't know if you looked at that.
Yeah, possibly. It's, you know, it's an idea in its early stages, but just thinking about the future and progressing things forwards. Yeah, I quite like the idea of it, and also, like I say, giving someone else an opportunity to do, you know, other things, or, you know, it's kind of multi-land use on the farm. If there's other options, then I think that's going to be quite key going forwards to make things pay better.
Yeah, and William said they've had 2 apprentices and they've been fine, and they're actually taking one on this year. But like you've just said, Richard, however, finding a suitable candidate is very difficult. They actually came to him, and he said, and did add a couple of grand on your repair bill. So I guess that's just something to maybe need to do a tractor test on there. George is saying, having just taken on a junior employee, you do need to be realistic in your expectations, the amount of your time which will take in up training them. And I guess that's, yeah, whether you've got time, you know, kind of to do it. David said they took on a young chap 3 years ago who's been excellent, advertised the job with the young farmers and had a number of responses. So yeah, that's nice, David, as well, and kind of employing someone locally. So yeah, there's a few pointers there, Tom, of things to keep an eye on, but yeah, generally the feeling seems if you get the right guy, then that's good. So good. Thank you for sharing that. So the next one, I think, is Richard.
Yeah, so I just certainly just like to ask everybody's opinion, really, at the moment when it comes down to record keeping and sprays, fertilizers, and in-field options of drilling and stuff like that. We're using the Gatekeeper web app, but because it's browser based, it only takes for somebody to unclick off that browser and you're either locked out or data gets lost. And going forward, it's a you know, for me, it's a big area that there's not enough joined up thinking, and it all seems like it should work a lot easier than what it really does. So questions really, what do everybody else use? Other people's opinions. Yeah, I'm open to lots of suggestions and ideas. Because
yeah.
What have you found? Go on, Tom.
No, I was just going to say I have the same thing. You know, we use Gatekeeper. You know, offered other tools as well, and it's just making sure that you're actually getting some money's worth out of them, because actually sometimes a pen and paper or a spreadsheet doesn't cost you anything, and you just kind of have to add that up sometimes, what the value of some of these things are, and actually does that web app save you any time. perhaps not, because if you lose it and then you go in entering it manually sometimes. And I really like the idea of it and that connectivity, but like you, Richard, just find that sometimes it doesn't seem to work and actually slows you down.
I know Andrew and Sam, you've used quite a bit, and it's going to form part of our Monitor Farm Monday discussion a bit as well, isn't it, coming up?
So many different things available. It's just make sure you don't get swamped by things you probably don't need. Or
yeah, I mean we're using Gatekeeper, the same as you guys. We have got a link between my John Deere and Gatekeeper, so we generally now most of our equipment is telematic, so we can wire data transfer our spraying applications, our seeding, our fertilizer records. They can go straight back into Gatekeeper with a lot less clicks of the button. You've only got to just accept them and just check that they're all okay. So we do use that. Nothing's without its issues, but actually now we're finding it works really quite well. But obviously that's our situation because we have that flexibility with John Deere products in sort of fairly well synchronized with Gatekeeper at present. Yeah.
It's not easy, is it? There's a lot of different things out there. Tim's just saying Omnia have just launched a field diary operations module. You know, so there's lots of new technology coming out. David said geofoliar is very user friendly. Was using Gatekeeper, but it's too complicated. You know, so yeah, there's some different kind of things out there. You know, and if anybody's got any other kind of thoughts, you know, shout them in. Andrew's saying we use geofoliar and get on very well, and it's a lot cheaper than Gatekeeper. You know, and like Harry often says is you know, it's what return are you getting from this investment that's out there. Nick said they've just started using green light grower on the farm there, and it seems to be working well so far. Easy for the operator, the manager and the agronomist. So there's a few different ones out there, Richard, worth trying. There's just some nice comments back for you, Tom, from earlier. Pip saying people either make or break a farm, set out a trial period and go for it. I quite like that. It's a good quote, Pip. And also Stephen suggesting try rurallink.org.uk, people ex-military. I don't know if you've looked at that. Yeah, Martin's just saying it's important to make sure that whatever you do, Richard, it checks the legality of applied chemicals. You know, and I guess that's, you know, true. It's looking at the functionality, isn't it, and keeping you within it. So yeah, keep thoughts and suggestions coming in. Go on, Richard.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, as far as Gatekeeper itself is concerned, I'm sort of quite happy as a recording centre and being able to create my own maps and stuff like that. It's the bit from there to outside, that link there, that's the broken bit. And you know, it's even the Ag Leader system that runs on the sprayer should talk seamlessly to Gatekeeper, but it doesn't. And we had a problem of just literally, I wanted to get an AB line off the sprayer the other day, and I had to tell it was an old system in order for it to recognise the correct file. And it's silly stuff like that drives you up the wall, because it's just like, Jesus. And it, you know, you have to lie to it to get it to do what you want. So yeah, frustrating.
I'm sure there's people around the country that are going, well, the region that are going, yeah, I get you, Richard. So yeah, we're all in a different, trying to make technology work for us rather than the other way around, isn't it? So. Yeah. Good. I'm conscious of the time, but I'd just like to run through, Andrew and Sam, your last one. And if anybody's got any kind of last questions or thoughts, do pop them in the chat. We've got one last thing and then we're nearly there. It's been great. Got lots of people thanking you all for the discussion.
Oh, lost Teresa. You move on to the next slide, Christian.
Yep, will do now.
Oh, she's back.
Getting there.
Right, so this is we purchased a weather station the other year. We've now got a second one, and this is just a slide showing some disease modelling, which they've disease forecasting they've got on the system. So I haven't used it in earnest, but I just thought it'd be interesting just to put this slide up, just showing. So we got on the left, we've got 2019 and 2020 on the right. This is looking at septoria infection during the season. So you can see 2019, it's showing probably a lot more higher incidence of different severities of infection. and obviously on 2020 it's showing a lot less. I just really wanted to highlight that I didn't take any notice of this at the time because I kept looking, but I wasn't sure how to use it. I just think it reflects possibly the year we had with septoria pressure being lower last year, and it's just how we can use this information. Probably I'm thinking more towards the T2 timing of applications to see whether we need to be more eradicant or whether we need to be more protective on how much product we actually use and how much we actually spend. So it's just looking to see what other people thought out there of what's possible.
Have they been using it? And...
yeah, see what other systems are using, and is this just too much? We know, I know we've got, we use products as an insurance, but we obviously all relies on data. I know it's retrospective, but I just think there's some mileage in this just to keep an eye on things going through the season. So I just thought I'd put that out there really. Yeah.
It's interesting. It goes back to this technology, isn't it? The future of where we're going and what we're doing. Both Martin and Kit were quick off the mark saying, what make is your station, please, and the weather system that you're using? They're quite interesting.
Metos Pezel make is obviously, I know there's a lot out there now. That one's pretty much a private network. I know there's another network out there which are now sort of doing it so you can sort of join a network of a bigger group. This just seemed to have a lot more facilities, a lot more instruments there where you could sort of collect a lot more data, solar radiation, active radiation. I've got soil moisture, soil temperature, and leaf
John Deere as well.
Yeah, leaf wetness, and actually it does actually link into our My John Deere site as well if you wanted to sort of access it from there as well. So that's the system we're using, and I think Rich is looking to use the same system going forward, I think.
Yeah, we've got the grant from last autumn, so ours will be installed fairly soon. I'm looking to start learning with it. I think going forward, it has potential to be able to change the way in which we make decisions about fungicides and when we apply them. And it might only be, it's not a case of we might not apply fungicides, it might be just a case of we're delaying the application of that fungicide by maybe a week or 10 days, or bringing it forward, depending, trying to be better informed, make better informed decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's all where we're kind of going forwards, isn't it? Yeah, Andrew's saying as well, he's using the Metos system as well, and it's saving lots of money on fungicides if you're brave enough. So I think it's a challenge from Andrew, how brave are you? I guess the last couple of seasons have shown doing it. Jamie's with you, Tom. Got a question about pen and paper. He's saying, is the automatic data better than reading your rain gauge? That's a question for you, Andrew and Sam. What do you think there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just something we've probably always done in the past, but having a system where we can see the day-to-day data, or even weekly or monthly or yearly data of rainfalls, and it's just worth having for your farm. And we even find where we've got a satellite farm, which was talking about our second weather station, where we're finding rainfall patterns can be quite dramatically different between a small, we're only talking 5 or 6 miles, and the rainfall, for whether it be harvesting or whether it be cultivation, spraying, can be completely different. So we can actually see what's going on. I know it's what's happened, but it can be worthwhile if you're working on satellite farms. Yeah.
I think the idea is in the future that the disease forecasting and that side of it as we go forward, and changing fungicide options and things that we hopefully can look at it proactively as much going forward as well as retrospectively. So good. Thank you so much to everybody. I don't know if anybody that's out there kind of in the audience that's got any other questions, please pop them in the chat, but I think we're about there. Thank you all. That's been a fantastic discussion and conversation. I feel like we've covered a lot of points, but yeah, some really useful information. So if you've got any last questions, do feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll just run through the last bits, and yeah, thank you to you all. I'll just mention at this stage, most of you have done it now, and Christian's been busy kind of replying to you But if you do want your basis and Eroso points, if you pop those details in the question box as well, just include your membership number and your postcode, and we'll register that for you. So if we just go through the last bits of information, the Monitor Farm season's been a bit different for us all this year, hasn't it? And you know, it's not what we've done normally. Hopefully a lot of you have logged into the Monday, kind of Monitor Farm Monday sessions. We are going to do our normal Monitor Farm survey this year, and we've added in some extra bits just to ask you how you found the virtual sessions. We're really interested, Tom and Andrew and Sam and Richard, into what we might be able to do in the summer, and you know, even looking forward to next winter. So if there's things you've enjoyed that we've done this winter, let us know. If there's things that you think we could do a bit more of going forward, let us know as well. So yeah, if you could all take 2 minutes just to fill in that Monitor Farm survey that you can get from that link there, that would be great. And you might even win a hamper, which I think we could all do with a hamper at the moment. There's some goodies, so that would be brilliant. The next slide, Christian. Just a reminder that, you know, there are all the publications as you go into the season. I have on the handouts that you've got and the link attached our arable research review with all the information about your levy funded research that's going on at the moment, and the latest recommended list. You can still order hard copies, email me if you want it, or you know, you can download them online. Next slide, Christian. Just a reminder, as we go on to the new season, there's all the tools that we've got available. Are you signed up to receive the aphid alerts, particularly as we go into the season? Have you used kind of some of the other tools in the website? If you're not, just please feel free to let me know as we go forward. And I'll make sure you're signed up. Everybody needs to be signed up to aphid alerts. Everybody ought to be signed up to Agronomy News, you know, and make the most of what you're paying for there. I mentioned the business impact calculator earlier. That's not the right link I put in there, but if you Google business impact calculator AHDB, it will come up. We've got Farm Bench. We've just had my last business group meeting last night, you know, and it's been a tough year to benchmark, but I think, well, you'll all agree, you've all done benchmarking. We've had some really good discussions and conversations, and last year is an important year to think about the calculators and things we've got and the business work. So just a reminder that they're all available on the website. If you Google any of those, and or if you can't find anything, just come back and ask. The next slide, Christian, please. So we've had since November, every Monday evening, one of my colleagues or myself have been doing a webinar on all sorts of different topics. Richard, we did one on rotation planning. Tom, you did one on fungicides. Andrew and Sam, we're going to do one in a couple of weeks on data management, which I think will be a really interesting session, looking in a bit more detail whether it is time saved or lost time. And there's the last few coming up. All of those are available to watch back as a recording on the website, on our website and on our YouTube channel, and basis and Eroso points are available for watching those back as well. The next thing is we've got Milling Week. So we normally have the Milling Week conference in that last week of February. We're going to do it slightly differently this year and have an hour session every day on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So the details are again on that website, announcing the End Week Quality Awards, doing a technical update and looking at the supply chain. So there'll be really good ones to link up to if you're growing milling wheat. And similarly for oilseeds, we've got our normal oilseeds conference that we're running, and that's on the Friday of that week. So some last updates as we head into the season on those specific crops. So I think we've got lots of kind of lovely comments coming in saying thank you to everyone, and talking about it. William's asked what date's the next meeting. So William, those dates were just shared. We're looking at what we can do in the summer in terms of the Monitor Farm programme, whether we are able to be back out on farm or we can do things. We'll make sure we do something for you. And yeah, if you've got any suggestions or ideas that you'd like within restrictions, please do let us know. So thank you very much, Tom, to Andrew and Sam, and to Richard. It's been fantastic. Yeah, loads of kind of comments coming in, and thank you all for joining us. It's been great to have the discussion, and a lot of discussion this morning that we've all been having in various different ways that kind of brings it all together. You will get a survey as you leave today. If you just fancy filling in and letting us know, you know, any comments or anything, that's always useful, and we do really use them a lot. At the moment, I'm sharing on Twitter. You'll see there's a question about what more could AHDB do, and at the moment, I've been sharing every day kind of links on Twitter for things that you've asked about and that we've got the resources available already. The session has been recorded, so if you wanted to watch back or, you know, share it, I had a lovely email the other day from somebody with fertiliser practice that shared it with their neighbour. You know, feel free just to let people know that they're there, and if somebody says how can I get basis on Rosso points, let them know that this is a good way of doing it. So we're all on Twitter, feel free to share that, and I think just all left to say is feel free to ask me any questions that you have. You know, if you can't find anything, let me know, and all the best for the season ahead. Fingers crossed you get some dry weather and some nice light rain as and when you want it, and harvest 2021 will be one to remember with where you are. So thank you, Tom, thank you, Sam, thank you, Andrew and Richard, thank you everybody for all your questions and your points. There's lots there, and we'll see you all soon.